I stood before my locker, the cold metal pressing faintly against my forehead. My fingers traced the faded edges of a sticker slapped there years ago. 22 years accident-free. Some record. I ran the floor at Apex Industrial Solutions for that long without a single major incident. 22 years keeping good people safe. You know what my reward was for that? I muttered to the empty space around me, the usual hum of the machinery strangely absent. A faint scent of stale coffee hung in the air from the paper cup sitting cold on the bench beside me. This. I tapped the side of the plain cardboard box resting at my feet, already half filled with the few personal items I'd kept here. My name is Vincent Bell. I'm 59 years old, and until this morning, I was the lead foreman here in Bridgeport. We built industrial valves, high-pressure equipment destined for power plants and refineries. It was precision work, the kind where a fraction of an inch off, one moment of carelessness, could mean disaster, could cost lives somewhere far down the line. That trust, that responsibility, had been my life. Then came the call this morning. Eleanor Shaw from Human Resources, her voice carefully neutral over the intercom. Vincent, could you come up to the main conference room, please? The room itself felt different, newer, colder than the offices I remembered. Julian Vance, the new operations director, barely 4 months with Apex, sat at the head of the long, polished table. He glanced up from his laptop, his hands clean, shirt impeccably pressed. This guy, Julian, he'd never set foot on my actual work floor beyond the mandatory initial safety tour. He wouldn't know the smell of hot oil or the sound of a bearing about to give. His world was spreadsheets and projections. Vincent, Eleanor began, sliding a thin folder across the table towards me. Her gaze flickered away for just a second, a hint of discomfort I hadn't expected. We're implementing some operational changes across the board. The company is streamlining supervisory positions to enhance efficiency. Julian nodded along, eyes still on his screen. Market pressures, he murmured, rattling off the buzzwords. Competitive restructuring. KPI alignment. I opened the folder. Severance package details. 2 weeks' notice, during which I was expected to train my replacement. Half my pension would vest immediately, a lump sum. The rest, they'd graciously dole out in monthly payments over time. Even the Apex Industrial Solutions logo at the top of the page looked wrong, unfamiliar. It rebranded last year, some marketing firm's bright idea. Never bothered to mention it to the guys actually building the damn things. Your replacement starts tomorrow morning, Eleanor added, her tone as matter-of-fact as if discussing the cafeteria menu. His name is Miles Corbin. He holds a business degree from Hudson State University. Very promising young man, according to his file. I closed the folder gently, my hand resting on the cheap cover. I focused on the artificial wood grain of the conference table, tracing the lines with my eyes. 22 years. Not a single fatality, not one life-altering injury under my watch. 346 souls who went home to their families safe and sound day after day, because we did things the right way. I didn't just supervise. I built the safety protocols they were still using, the ones Julian probably saw as redundancies on his spreadsheet. I implemented the maintenance schedules they followed, schedules born from knowing each machine's quirks, its groans, its limits. I trained every single foreman, every lead tech who worked on that floor, passing on the knowledge that kept things running smoothly, safely. I understand, I said, the words feeling dry, foreign in my mouth. Julian finally looked up, a flicker of relief crossing his smooth features. He clearly hadn't relished this confrontation. Eleanor managed a tight, professional smile that didn't come close to reaching her eyes. That evening, I drove home the long way, taking the route that wound past the Riverside Industrial Park. The rusted skeletons of the old refineries stood silhouetted against the fading light, monuments to a different era. My own father worked in places like that before the companies chased cheaper labor south. I remembered his rough hands, the smell of grease embedded in his skin. Vince, he used to tell me, his voice gruff but steady, a man's real value isn't in the talk. It's in what he builds. What he leaves behind that works. I thought I had built something solid at Apex. A system that protected people. A culture of care and precision. A safety record nobody could argue with. Now, I had 2 weeks. 2 weeks to hand over the keys to that kingdom. The legacy of 2 decades to a kid armed with a business degree and efficiency metrics. A kid who wouldn't understand the intricate human machinery he was about to dismantle in the name of streamlining. When I finally reached my empty house, the silence felt heavy. I poured myself a whiskey, the burn familiar in my throat, and dialed an old number. Walter Reed, my old buddy, lucky enough to retire last year before the spreadsheets took over completely. Walter, it's Vince. They're letting me go, I told him, the words blunt, stripped of any pretense. There was a moment of silence on the line, then Walter's predictable, indignant roar. Those bastards. After everything? He calmed slightly. You gonna raise hell, Vince? Fight it? I took another swallow of whiskey, staring at the wall. No, I said quietly. Not like that. It wouldn't do any good. But they'll figure it out soon enough. Some knowledge doesn't transfer through a 2-week handover or a damn spreadsheet. They'll learn. We talked a little longer, mostly Walter cursing the corporate world and me listening. After hanging up, I sat there for a long time, my gaze falling on my work boots by the back door. 22 years of factory floor grime, grease, and metal dust were embedded deep in the worn leather. You could never quite scrub it all out. It was part of you. They had absolutely no idea what they were losing. They saw a line item on a budget, an aging foreman past his prime. They didn't see the knowledge stored in these hands, these ears, this gut. I started at Apex Industrial. It was under a different name back then, before the first buyout when my boy, Noah, was just a baby. Diana and I had been married 4 years, barely scraping by. That job, it wasn't just a paycheck. It meant stability. It meant health insurance for my family. It meant feeling like I could finally build a decent future. Started on third shift, 3 nights a week. Made supervisor after 3 hard years, learning every inch of that floor. Assistant foreman after 7, soaking up everything old Jack Thompson, the previous lead, could teach me. When Jack finally retired, handing me the reins felt like inheriting a sacred trust. That factory floor became my second home, maybe even my first for a long time. I knew the personality of every machine. I could tell by the pitch of the whine when the number 3 press was straining, long before any fancy sensor threw a warning light. I could spot a potential safety hazard, a loose guard, an improperly stored tool from 50 yards away. I could smell when the hydraulic fluid needed changing, a faint acrid undertone beneath the usual industrial scents. Hell, I could feel it in the air when the ambient temperature was off by just a couple of degrees, knowing how it might affect the tolerances on the precision jobs. Diana used to joke, though sometimes it didn't sound like joking. You care more about that noisy factory than you do about this house, Vincent. Maybe she was right. Especially after she packed up and left 10 years ago. Took Noah with her, all the way out to Denver. Said she needed a life where she didn't feel like the second priority after a pile of machinery. After that, I poured everything I had left into the job. Holidays, weekends, those brutal storm days when half the crew couldn't even make it through the snowdrifts to clock in, I was there. The plant floor didn't talk back, didn't complain. It just demanded attention, skill, vigilance. And I gave it. The company itself changed hands twice during my tenure. First, Horizon Manufacturing Group bought us out back in 2011. They were mostly hands-off, trusted the local management, kept things pretty much the same. Then, in 2020, Catalyst Equity Partners swooped in. Private equity guys. Different breed altogether. Suddenly, it was all about algorithms, efficiency metrics, and trimming excess capacity. That's corporate speak for getting rid of people and squeezing every last drop out of what's left. The changes started subtly, insidiously. Maintenance budgets got tighter. Procurement started pushing cheaper, off-brand parts and suppliers. The carefully calculated intervals between critical machine servicing got stretched longer and longer. Just testing the operational limits, Julian would probably call it. They replaced three of my best, most experienced mechanics guys who knew those machines inside out with cheaper contract workers who needed constant supervision. The inventory of essential replacement parts dwindled. Just-in-time delivery, they called it. I called it gambling. And all the while, the production quotas kept creeping higher, quarter after quarter, pushing men and machines harder. 6 months ago, Julian Vance arrived, fresh-faced with his MBA diploma and his arsenal of spreadsheets. He called an all-hands floor meeting his first week. Stood up there on a makeshift platform, looking uncomfortable in his suit amidst the noise and grit. We're implementing new, comprehensive performance tracking across all departments, he announced, his voice barely carrying over the din. Data-driven decision-making is the future of modern manufacturing. After the meeting, Ricardo Diaz, my lead machinist, a guy whose hands were as skilled as any surgeon's, pulled me aside, wiping grease off his knuckles with a rag. "Boss," he said, his brow furrowed with concern. "This guy, this Julian, he's gonna be trouble. Mark my words." Ricardo told me Julian had actually asked him, right there on the floor, if they could somehow modify the safety lockout/tagout procedure, the non-negotiable protocol that prevents machines from starting up during maintenance, just to shave a few minutes off downtime. I'd brushed it off at the time, maybe too quickly. Told Ricardo we'd handle the new guy, manage things like we always had, by sticking to the rules that kept people safe. But the warning signs kept flashing, brighter and more frequent. Julian stopped showing up for the mandatory monthly safety review meetings. Too busy analyzing data, apparently. My emails detailing necessary equipment maintenance or requesting updates went unanswered for days, sometimes weeks. My formal requests for the training budget, essential for keeping the crew updated on new equipment and procedures, were denied 3 times in a row. Non-essential expenditure, the rejection memo stated. Then they hired 3 junior supervisors, straight out of college, eager but green. They started questioning procedures we'd spent decades refining, procedures based on hard-won experience, near misses, and sometimes, sadly, actual accidents from the distant past. "Mr. Bell," one of them asked me, clipboard in hand, "is it really strictly necessary to run a full diagnostic sequence after every single shift change? The operational manual only recommends weekly checks for this unit." Another piped up during a safety walkthrough. "These daily pre-operational inspections seem a bit excessive, don't they? Couldn't we consolidate them?" That's when I started keeping my own records, meticulously. At home, off the company network. Dating and photographing every maintenance request I submitted, especially the ones that got denied or delayed. Documenting every conversation, every time I raised a concern about safety shortcuts with Julian or the new junior supervisors. Something deep in my gut told me I might need proof someday. Proof of what we'd been doing right all those years, before the data-driven future arrived. I just didn't expect I'd be the one shown the door before the real trouble started. The kid they brought in to replace me, Miles Corbin, showed up sharp on Monday morning. Shiny dress shoes clicking on the concrete. A sound you never hear on the actual floor. And a crisp tie perfectly knotted. Looked about 28, maybe younger, with that overly styled gelled hair and a tablet computer he seemed surgically attached to, checking it every 5 minutes like he was expecting a vital status update from the digital world. "Mr. Bell, it's a real honor," he said, offering a firm, practiced handshake, the kind they drill into you in business school seminars. "I'm genuinely excited to learn everything I can from you before I take over the reins." He puffed up slightly. I've already spent the weekend reviewing all the production metrics online. I identified several key areas with significant efficiency opportunities right off the bat. I just nodded slowly, my expression carefully neutral. I reached into the locker beside mine, the one they'd already assigned him, and pulled out a brand new pair of steel-toed boots and a set of safety glasses, still in their plastic wrap. I handed them to him. "Floor tour first, Miles," I said, my voice level. "Metrics and opportunities can wait. For the next 2 weeks, you stick with me." For 2 agonizing weeks, I walked Miles through every corner of that plant. I showed him the maintenance schedules I'd perfected over years, explaining the why behind each check, each lubrication point, each torque specification. I laid out the safety protocols, the emergency shutdown procedures, the evacuation routes, emphasizing the potential consequences of cutting corners. I showed him the personnel files, highlighting not just job roles, but the individuals, their experience levels, their specific training, any limitations or accommodations they needed. I introduced him personally to every shift supervisor, every lead operator, trying to impress upon him the importance of these people, their knowledge, their dedication. But as the days bled into one another, I noticed something deeply unsettling. Miles was taking copious notes on his tablet, mapping processes, charting workflows, analyzing cycle times. He was learning the what, but completely missing the who. He didn't ask Ricardo about his son, who had just shipped out for Marine boot camp, something Ricardo was immensely proud and worried sick about. He didn't remember, or maybe didn't care, that Sofia Perez on the assembly line needed slightly longer, more frequent breaks because of her diabetes, something I'd always quietly accommodated to keep a valuable, experienced worker on the line. He clearly didn't grasp the concept that some machines, like the temperamental number 2 milling machine, needed a bit of sweet talking, specific startup sequences and careful adjustments, especially on cold Bridgeport mornings, or they'd fight you all day. That wasn't in any manual. It was knowledge held in the hands and heads of the people he barely seemed to see. Then, on my last Thursday, just 2 days before my final clock out, I overheard him talking with Julian in the break room. I'd gone back for my thermos, and they didn't see me lingering by the doorway. "Once we fully implement the new optimized shift schedule," Miles was saying, sounding eager to impress, "I think we can probably consolidate 2 of the dedicated maintenance positions. The cross-training matrix indicates sufficient skill overlap." He consulted his tablet again. "And that extra safety redundancy protocol Vincent insists on for the main hydraulic press? I've double-checked the manufacturer's manual. It doesn't explicitly require those additional weekly checks he mandated." Julian nodded, a smug little smile playing on his lips. "Exactly the kind of fresh perspective and data-driven analysis we needed, Miles. Trimming the fat. Good work." They didn't see me standing there, a cold knot forming in the pit of my stomach. I turned and walked away quietly, the thermos forgotten on the counter. This wasn't just about saving a few bucks on headcount or stretching maintenance intervals anymore. They were actively, consciously dismantling the very safeguards I had spent decades building and refining. Protections designed not just to meet minimum manual requirements, but to keep real people, people I knew and respected, from losing fingers, hands, arms, or worse. That afternoon, sitting alone in my car during my final lunch break, I made a decision. This wasn't just my job anymore. It was about the people I was leaving behind. I couldn't just walk away clean. I discreetly called an impromptu meeting with a handful of people on that floor I trusted implicitly. Ricardo Diaz, my rock-solid lead machinist. Sofia Perez, quiet but observant from her station on the assembly line. Marcus Cole, the veteran maintenance tech they hadn't managed to replace yet. And Leroy Jenkins, the steady hand who ran the night shift. We met after their shifts ended, huddled awkwardly by our cars in the far corner of the employee parking lot, the setting sun casting long shadows. "Listen up," I told them, keeping my voice low but intense. "They're going to start cutting corners. Not might, they are. Deeper than you think. And the new kid, Miles? He's smart on paper, but he doesn't know what he doesn't know about this place, about these machines. Ricardo spat on the asphalt, his expression grim. So what do you want us to do, boss? We gotta follow orders, right? Can't just ignore the new supervisor. No, I agreed, shaking my head. You can't ignore him. Don't make waves. Don't give them an excuse. But I leaned in closer, making eye contact with each of them. You can document everything. Everything. Keep your own logs, discreetly. Note down every time a maintenance request is denied or postponed. Every time a cheaper part is used. Every near miss. Every unusual noise. Every safety concern you raise that gets brushed off. I pulled out a small stack of plain index cards from my pocket. On each, I'd handwritten my personal cell phone number. I handed one to each of them. If things start going sideways, if a machine feels wrong, if you see something dangerous, don't just report it up the new chain of command and hope for the best. You call me, not management. Me, anytime, day or night. They took the cards, their expressions a mixture of grim understanding and fierce loyalty. I spent my final day clearing out my locker for real this time. Tossing out old manuals, worn-out gloves, years of accumulated memories. When I walked past my old office, Miles Corbin was already sitting at my desk, rearranging the items on its surface, putting his own stamp on the space I'd occupied for so long. He looked up as I paused in the doorway. I walked over and placed my ring of master keys on the desk in front of him. The metallic clink sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet office. "Any last words of advice?" he asked, his attempt at casualness falling flat. He barely looked up from fiddling with his tablet. I met his gaze squarely. "Yeah," I said, my voice low and steady. "Listen to the floor, Miles. Listen to the people, sure, but listen to the machines too. They talk to you if you pay attention. They tell you when something's wrong before it breaks." He offered a polite, blank smile, the kind you give when you don't quite understand but want to seem agreeable. He clearly thought I was being metaphorical, maybe even a little senile. He didn't get it. He wouldn't. I turned and walked out without another word. No farewell party in the break room. No sheet cake with awkward frosting. No back-slapping speeches about my years of service. 22 years at Apex Industrial Solutions ended with a brief, cool handshake from Eleanor Shaw in the sterile HR office and a deactivated parking lot exit badge clutched in my hand as I drove away from the plant for the last time. But I wasn't really done with Apex. Not by a long shot. I was just waiting. Playing the long game. It took exactly 3 weeks for the first call to come. It was Ricardo Diaz, his voice hushed, tense. "Boss," he whispered, sounding like he was calling from inside a noisy supply closet. They did it. They officially changed the maintenance schedule on the main hydraulic presses, pushing it from weekly full inspections to bi-weekly. Just like the kid wanted. My jaw tightened. Those presses were the heart of the line, powerful and potentially dangerous if not meticulously maintained. "Document it, Ricardo," I said calmly, keeping my own anger in check. "Note the date the change was implemented. Keep a detailed log. Any fluctuations in pressure readings, any new leaks, however small, any unusual sounds during operation. Write it all down, with dates and times." 2 days later, another call. This time from Marcus Cole, the seasoned maintenance tech who knew the guts of that place better than anyone. "Vince? It's Marcus. You're not going to believe this." His voice was rough with frustration. "They just denied my parts order for the backup generator overhaul. Said we can defer until the next quarterly inventory assessment to optimize cash flow. That generator hasn't been properly serviced in over a year because of their budget freezes. If the main power grid goes down," he didn't need to finish the sentence. I kept a meticulous log of every call, every text message, every hushed conversation. Every change implemented, every corner cut, every warning sign reported by my eyes and ears still inside. The file grew thicker each day. At the 4-week mark, I decided it was time to make a formal, documented move. I composed a carefully worded email addressed to Julian Vance and copied to Eleanor Shaw. Professional, concise, and to the point. Subject: concerns regarding recent protocol modifications. Julian and Eleanor, I wrote, I've received some concerning secondhand reports regarding recent changes to established safety and maintenance protocols on the main production floor. Having personally overseen the development and implementation of these systems for over 2 decades, I feel obligated to express my professional concern. I would be happy to consult on a pro bono basis regarding the potential operational and safety risks these modifications might inadvertently introduce. I hit send, knowing it was likely futile, but needing it on record. Eleanor replied within the hour, faster than I expected. Her reply was just as carefully worded, just as professional, and just as dismissive. Thank you for your continued concern for Apex Industrial, Vincent, it read. We appreciate you reaching out. However, I can assure you the transition under Miles Corbin's supervision has been remarkably smooth. Miles has already successfully implemented several key efficiency improvements that are showing positive results on our performance metrics. We value your past contributions, and we will certainly reach out should we require your specific historical insight in the future. Corporate Speak 4. Stay away, old man. Your time is done. We've got this handled. At 6 weeks post-termination, the first real incident happened. Minor, thankfully. No injuries. A drive belt slipped on the number 3 press, one of the machines whose preventative maintenance schedule had been optimized. Caused a 2-hour shutdown, threw the day's production targets into chaos. Then, a small but persistent hydraulic fluid leak appeared in week 7, near a connection point where a cheaper sealant had been used during the last cost-effective repair. Week 8 brought a cascade of problems. 3 separate electrical issues on different lines, flickering lights, tripped breakers, one control panel briefly shorting out. Leroy Jenkins, my reliable night shift lead, called me after each incident, his voice tight with frustration. The new guys, Mr. Bell. They're blaming the equipment itself, Leroy reported. Miles keeps saying in the shift briefings that it's all outdated legacy hardware that's poorly maintained. Your maintenance, he means. My blood simmered. That equipment wasn't outdated. It was robust, reliable workhorse machinery that had run flawlessly for years under proper care and preventative maintenance. The maintenance I had overseen. By week 10, I couldn't just sit back and listen anymore. The simmering anger turned into cold resolve. I drove over to the plant during the main lunch break, parking my truck across the street, out of sight of the security cameras. I waited. When Ricardo Diaz came out, heading towards the sandwich truck, I waved him over. He slid into the passenger seat, glancing around nervously before shutting the door. How bad is it really, Ricardo? I asked, cutting straight to the chase. Tell me the truth. Ricardo let out a long, weary sigh, rubbing his temples. Bad, boss. Real bad. Production's down nearly 15% overall since you left, despite the quotas being higher. And they fired Marcus Cole last week. My stomach clenched. Marcus? He was the best. Said he was resistant to the new operational changes, Ricardo continued, his voice laced with bitterness. Truth is, he refused to sign off on a repair using substandard parts Julian ordered. Now Miles has got some college buddy of his running maintenance. Kid looks like he couldn't tell a torque wrench from a damn screwdriver. A cold dread washed over me. Anyone been hurt? I asked, the question I feared most. Not seriously. Not yet, Ricardo said hesitantly. But Leroy Jenkins on nights. He almost lost his right hand last Tuesday. Safety switch failed on the main cutting line. Didn't engage when it was supposed to. My knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. Jesus, is he okay? Yeah, scared the hell out of him. Sliced his glove open. Deep gash, but his hand is intact. Pure luck. And guess what Miles wrote up in the official incident report? Ricardo's voice dripped with contempt. Operator error. Blamed Leroy. That was it. The final straw. Operator error. The oldest management trick in the book to cover up equipment failure or systemic negligence. I made the decision right then and there. They weren't just incompetent. They were actively covering up dangerous failures. I knew people, contacts I'd made over 22 years at the State Industrial Safety Board. One anonymous, well-informed call could trigger an unannounced inspection. It was time to bring in the regulators. The next morning, sitting at my kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee and my meticulously compiled logbook open before me, I made that call. I explained my concerns calmly and clearly. My long history with the Apex plant, the specific, documented changes to maintenance protocols and safety procedures that worried me most, the recent incidents, including Leroy's near miss and the alleged cover-up. The inspector on the other end, a woman named Evelyn Hayes, listened patiently, asked sharp, pertinent questions, and took detailed notes. Based on what you've told me, Mr. Bell, particularly your history and the specific nature of these allegations, this warrants a closer look, she assured me, her voice professional and serious. We will conduct an unannounced inspection within the next 2 weeks. I hung up the phone feeling a grim sense of satisfaction, maybe a little bit of relief. The system, the official channels, would work. They had to. Apex would be forced to clean up its act. That relief lasted exactly 3 days. My phone rang again. It was Ricardo, his voice tight with panic, almost breathless. Boss, they know. They know it was you. Someone tipped off management that you were the one behind the safety board inspection request. Julian Vance is going nuclear. Absolute meltdown. My stomach plummeted, cold dread washing over me. How? Who would? It didn't matter now. What's happening, Ricardo? What are they doing? They've got us all working mandatory overtime. He rushed on, whispering frantically. Cleaning everything up like maniacs. Scrubbing floors, painting over rust spots, suddenly finding maintenance logs that cover the last 6 months. Logs I know damn well didn't exist yesterday. They've even shut down 2 of the main production lines completely, saying it's for unscheduled urgent maintenance. They're trying to fix all the biggest problems, patch everything up before the inspector shows up. Then came the formal counterattack. Not a phone call, but a legal letter, delivered by a stony-faced courier right to my front door that evening. Crisp, expensive paper, embossed letterhead from a big downtown law firm. Apex Industrial Solutions, via their attorneys, was formally accusing me, Vincent Bell, of malicious interference with ongoing business operations and potential violation of confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements signed during my employment. They threatened immediate legal action, seeking damages if I continued disseminating false or misleading information regarding company practices or contacted any current employees. My hands shook slightly as I read the jargon-filled pages. This was pure intimidation. I immediately called my lawyer, a sharp guy I'd used for my divorce years ago. I read him the key paragraphs. He listened patiently, then sighed. Okay, Vince. Deep breath. The NDE violation part? That sounds like mostly bluff and bluster, based on what you've told me. You haven't shared proprietary trade secrets, just raised safety concerns, which is arguably protected whistleblower activity. But, he cautioned, his voice turning serious, that doesn't mean they can't make your life miserable. A lawsuit, even a frivolous one, can drown you in legal fees. They know that. Can they stop the safety board inspection? I asked, my voice tight. No, not directly. Once the board decides to inspect based on a credible complaint, it happens. They can't legally prevent the inspector from entering. But Vince, be damn careful, he warned before hanging up. These catalyst equity types, they play dirty, especially when they feel cornered. Watch your back. I hung up the phone, anger churning with a new layer of anxiety. They weren't just trying to silence me. They were actively trying to rig the game, scrubbing the evidence clean while simultaneously threatening me for pointing it out. But what would happen after the inspection inevitably passed, after they'd put on their Potemkin Village safety show? They'd just go right back to cutting the same corners, maybe even more aggressively now, thinking they'd gotten away with it. Only next time, they'd be more careful about leaving a trail. One inspection, even a surprise one, wasn't going to be enough to fix the underlying rot. I needed more than just allegations. I needed irrefutable proof of systemic, deliberate negligence, proof that couldn't be explained away or buried in paperwork. The safety board inspection came and went, exactly as I'd feared. Apex Industrial Solutions passed. Barely. Evelyn Hayes, the inspector, called me afterwards, off the record, as a professional courtesy. "They scrambled, Mr. Bell," she said, a note of frustration in her voice. "They fixed the most immediate, obvious safety violations we could cite. The blocked emergency exits, the missing machine guards they suddenly found and reinstalled. But their maintenance documentation was a mess. Inconsistent dates, missing signatures, logs that looked suspiciously new. Several employees I interviewed gave responses that sounded rehearsed, coached. "So, what happens now?" I asked, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. "Will there be penalties? Fines?" "Yes, some minor citations will be issued," she confirmed. "But frankly, not enough to force significant long-term behavioral change, given the company's size. They'll pay the fines as a cost of doing business." I thanked her for the update and hung up, feeling a wave of frustration wash over me, quickly followed by a grim resolve. I wasn't surprised, not really. Companies like Apex, backed by giants like Catalyst Equity, knew how to play this game. Fix the visible cracks, pay the small tolls, and get right back on the same dangerous highway. Business as usual. That weekend, my doorbell rang unexpectedly on Saturday afternoon. Standing on my front porch, looking nervous and out of place, was Leroy Jenkins, the night shift lead. He clutched a small, nondescript object in his hand. "Sorry to bother you at home, Mr. Bell," he mumbled, shifting his weight. I couldn't risk bringing this up at the plant. Needed to show you something away from prying eyes." He held out his hand. It contained a simple USB thumb drive. "What's this, Leroy?" I asked, taking the small device. It felt heavy with unspoken significance. It's the maintenance logs, Mr. Bell," Leroy explained, his voice low and urgent. "The real ones. The ones Marcus Cole kept hidden on a separate server partition before they fired him. And the fake ones they created last minute for the inspection. Miles made his college buddy stay up all night fabricating them." He took a deep breath. "Plus, there are emails between Julian Vance and the big shots at Catalyst Equity Corporate about the cost savings initiative. They've been planning these maintenance cuts, ignoring safety warnings for over a year, long before you were even let go. They knew the risks. They needed someone in your job who wouldn't push back, who wouldn't make waves like you always did." I ushered Leroy inside, my heart pounding. We sat at my kitchen table for hours, plugging the drive into my old laptop, scrolling through file after file. The picture that emerged was far worse, far more calculated than even I had imagined. This wasn't just about replacing an experienced, higher-paid veteran foreman with a cheaper junior manager to boost short-term profits. Apex Industrial, under direct guidance from Catalyst Equity Partners, was implementing a deliberate, company-wide strategy of systemic underinvestment in safety and critical maintenance. They were consciously offsetting the statistically increased risk of accidents and potential injuries or deaths against the projected quarterly savings from deferred maintenance and cheaper parts. One email chain between Julian and a senior VP at Catalyst was particularly chilling. It discussed the projected cost savings versus the potential insurance liability increase from anticipated minor workplace incidents. The VP's final word: "Insurance covers accidents. Missed earnings targets cost us investors. Proceed with the optimized maintenance schedule as planned." They were gambling, coldly, deliberately gambling with the lives and limbs of my people. The men and women I had worked alongside, trained, and felt responsible for protecting for 22 years. There's more, Leroy said grimly, pointing to another folder on the USB drive labeled Denied Mrs. Corbin. Miles. The kid knows the equipment is failing. He's not completely stupid, just weak. Look at these maintenance requests he submitted himself in the last month. And look at the denials coming back from Julian or corporate. The list was staggering. Requests for critical safety component replacements on the presses, overhauls for aging backup systems, urgent preventive replacements flagged by the few remaining experienced techs. All declined, stamped with the same digital note. Defer to next fiscal quarter per active budget constraints. Jay Vance, why are you showing me all this, Leroy? I asked quietly, looking him straight in the eye. You know this could cost you your job, probably worse if they ever found out? Leroy's expression hardened, the nervousness replaced by a quiet fury. Sophia Perez's nephew got hurt yesterday afternoon, Mr. Bell, he said, his voice thick with emotion. On the number 2 press, guard failed to deploy. The same guard Miles said wasn't critical priority to replace last week, according to Marcus's old logs on here. Kid's only 19, just started 2 months ago. Lost 2 fingers clean off. He slammed his fist softly on the table, and they're calling it operator error, making the poor kid sign preliminary paperwork while he was still doped up on painkillers at the clinic. Said it would speed up the workers' comp. My own hands clenched involuntarily into fists beneath the table. The bastards. They can't do that, I choked out, the words thick with rage. They are doing it, Mr. Bell, Leroy said, his eyes meeting mine, filled with a mixture of despair and determination. They are, and it's only a matter of time before something much, much worse happens. Someone's gonna die in there if we don't stop them. After Leroy left, disappearing back into the rainy afternoon, I sat alone in my kitchen for hours. The damning evidence lay spread across my table on the laptop screen. USB files containing logs, emails, denied requests, a digital tapestry of corporate greed and calculated negligence. I was torn between a white-hot fury demanding immediate, explosive action and the heavy weight of responsibility I still felt for the people inside that plant. These weren't just names on a list or data points on a spreadsheet. These were lives. Ricardo, Sophia, Leroy, dozens of others I'd shared coffee with, worked alongside through long shifts, whose families I knew. My first instinct was to pick up the phone, call Evelyn Hayes at the safety board again, dump all this new, explosive evidence on her desk. But then I stopped, my hand hovering over the phone. What would happen? Another inspection, perhaps more thorough this time, bigger fines maybe. A temporary shutdown, a management shuffle. But Catalyst Equity Partners had deep pockets and teams of lawyers. They'd weather the storm, install new puppets, and eventually, the pressure for quarterly profits would inevitably lead back to the same place. Cutting corners, squeezing the system, gambling with lives. No, another inspection wouldn't be enough to fundamentally change the culture they'd imposed. This required a different kind of leverage, a different kind of pressure. I picked up my phone, but instead of calling the safety board, I called Ricardo Diaz, then Sophia Perez, then Leroy Jenkins, then 6 other trusted, long-serving veterans from the floor, electricians, welders, quality control inspectors, people I knew had integrity, people who cared about doing the job right. We arranged to meet secretly the next day at Walter Reed's house out in the suburbs, neutral territory, far from prying eyes at the plant or in my neighborhood. When everyone had gathered in Walter's cluttered den, the air thick with tension and stale cigar smoke, I laid it all out. I told them what Leroy had brought me. I showed them the key emails, the falsified logs contrasted with the real ones, the long list of denied safety critical maintenance requests. I showed them the cold calculation behind the cost savings initiative. When I finally finished, the room was silent, stunned. Jesus Christ, Ricardo finally breathed, shaking his head slowly. So what do we do now, boss? He asked, his gaze sweeping across the grim faces in the room. Go to the newspapers? The TV stations? I shook my head slowly. Not yet. That might feel good, but Catalyst has PR teams to spin anything. They'd paint us as disgruntled employees, maybe even sue us for defamation. First, we need leverage. Real leverage they can't ignore. What kind of leverage? Sophia asked, her voice barely a whisper, but her eyes were fierce. The kind that hits them where they live, I said, tapping the Catalyst Equity Partners logo on one of the printed emails. Their bottom line, their reputation with their biggest customers, their legal exposure. I looked around the room, meeting each person's eye. Here's what I need from you, and it's risky, I continued, my voice low and serious. I need records, concrete proof, of every shortcut taken, every failure covered up, every near miss that didn't get properly reported, every single safety concern raised and ignored since I left. Documented, dated, photographed or videoed, if possible, discreetly. Build your own files. Walter Reed, ever the pragmatist, pointed out the obvious danger. They'll fire anyone they even suspect is collecting that kind of information, Vince or worse. I know, I acknowledged grimly. The risk is real. That's why we need to be smart about this. Careful, patient, no unnecessary risks. I looked around at these good people, skilled hands, loyal hearts. They deserved so much better than to be treated as disposable cogs in a ruthless corporate machine designed solely to extract maximum profit, regardless of the human cost. Give me 2 weeks, I said, a plan beginning to form in my mind. Feed me everything you safely can. Names, dates, times, specific machine numbers, photos of faulty parts or dangerous conditions. Use burner phones if you have to. Drop notes off-site. And whatever you do inside that plant, I added, my voice hardening, keep your eyes wide open, watch each other's backs, and stay safe. Don't become one of their statistics. For the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost haunting the periphery of Apex Industrial Solutions. I never set foot back on the property, never drove past the main gate, but my presence was felt. Ricardo, Sophia, Leroy, and the others became my clandestine network, feeding me a steady stream of information. Copies of altered daily shift reports slipped under my car's windshield wiper in a grocery store parking lot. Photos texted from burner phones showing cracked welds, leaking seals, bypassed safety sensors. Whispered accounts of equipment failures quickly patched over, safety incidents downplayed or misreported in official logs. I compiled everything meticulously in my home office, cross-referencing dates and times, building a detailed, undeniable case file that documented a pattern of willful negligence. This couldn't be dismissed as isolated incidents or disgruntled employee complaints. Meanwhile, operating from the shadows, I made 3 critical moves. First, I reached out to Arthur Vance. Not Julian's relative, just an unfortunate coincidence of names. Arthur was a senior VP at Meridian Power Systems, Apex Industrial's single biggest customer. I'd worked closely with Arthur for years on several major contracts, and he respected my technical expertise and straight shooting approach. We met for coffee at a quiet diner 20 miles outside Bridgeport, far from any potential Apex observers. Vincent, good to see you, man, Arthur said, shaking my hand warmly. Was wondering what happened to you over at Apex. Heard rumors you retired? Forced retirement, Arthur, I said bluntly. New management, new priorities. But that's not why I asked to meet. I slid a small, plain envelope across the table. Inside were high-resolution photographs my network had managed to take. Photos of recently shipped pressure valves, manufactured by Apex in the last month, already showing signs of microscopic cracks near the welds, likely due to substandard materials or rushed production processes implemented after I left. Valves destined for installation in critical Meridian Power Systems facilities. These passed your new internal quality control? Arthur asked, his friendly demeanor instantly replaced by a sharp frown as he studied the photos. They passed Apex's new inspection process, yes, I confirmed grimly. The corner cutting has consequences that go beyond their own factory walls. Arthur, potential consequences for your operations, your people. I couldn't live with myself if something catastrophic failed at one of your facilities because I kept quiet. Arthur examined the photos again, then looked me square in the eye. His expression was serious. This is deeply concerning, Vincent. We have 30-year relationships with some of our core suppliers, Apex included. But safety and quality are non-negotiable for Meridian. I'm not asking you to take my word for it, I said. All I'm asking, Arthur, is that Meridian conducts its own independent quality audit on recent and upcoming Apex deliveries. Pull some samples, run your own tests. See for yourself what kind of product they're shipping now. He nodded slowly. Consider it done, Vincent. We'll initiate an immediate supplier quality review. My second move was contacting Evelyn Hayes again at the State Industrial Safety Board. This time, I didn't just offer general concerns or second-hand reports. I provided her with a detailed, organized submission package via secure email containing specific, documented violations, Leroy's USB data, cross-referenced with the new photographic evidence, dates, times, machine serial numbers, and first-hand, though anonymized witness accounts of safety failures and near misses. Mr. Bell, this is substantially more detailed and corroborated than your initial report, Evelyn said when she called me back after reviewing the files. Her voice held a new note of gravity. This documentation suggests a potential pattern of systemic issues, not just isolated incidents. I'll need to bring my supervisor and our legal counsel in on this immediately. I understand, I told her. Do what you need to do. Just please, try to keep my name out of the official investigation triggers for as long as possible. Retaliation is a serious concern. She agreed to do her best. The third move was the riskiest, a calculated gamble. I reached out directly to Miles Corbin. Not through official channels, but via a LinkedIn message, vaguely worded, suggesting a brief, off-the-record chat about industry trends. To my surprise, he agreed almost immediately. We met for lunch at a neutral, unremarkable chain restaurant halfway between the plant and the city. He looked terrible, exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, his usually perfect hair slightly mussed, his tie loosened at the collar. The confident business school grade veneer was cracking under the strain. I appreciate you meeting me, Mr. Bell, he said, picking listlessly at his salad after we ordered. So, I began, keeping my tone neutral. How's the floor really running these days, Miles? He ran a hand through his hair, letting out a ragged sigh. Honestly, Mr. Bell, it's a complete mess. Equipment failing constantly, left and right. We can't meet the production targets Catalyst keeps demanding because half the line seems to break down every other damn day. Corporate, Julian Vance mainly, is breathing down my neck constantly about the numbers, but they won't approve the maintenance requests I send up. It's impossible. They didn't exactly tell you what you were walking into, did they, Miles? I asked gently. He shook his head, looking down at his plate. They said the operation needed modernizing, that you were, resistant to necessary change. But it feels like every time I try to fix one problem, 3 more pop up somewhere else. It's like whack-a-mole, but with million-dollar machines. I nodded slowly, letting the silence hang for a moment. That's because they didn't just modernize, Miles. They dismantled a complex system that worked, a system built on decades of experience. Those maintenance schedules you scrapped, the safety protocols you thought were excessive, they weren't arbitrary. They were necessary. They were the glue holding it all together. Julian keeps saying the budget can't support that level of preventative maintenance, Miles protested weakly. Oh, and how's the budget looking right now? I counted pointedly. With production down 15%, rejection rates soaring, and your biggest customer about to launch a surprise quality audit? Miles' silence was answer enough. He knew he was in over his head, caught between corporate pressure and operational reality. Listen, I said, leaning forward slightly. I didn't ask you here today to gloat or say, I told you so. I asked you here because in about 2 weeks, maybe sooner, Several things are going to happen all at once. Meridian Power Systems is going to demand that quality audit, and they won't like what they find. The State Safety Board is going to conduct another surprise inspection, armed this time with specific, damning evidence they can't easily hide. And the full package of evidence detailing systematic safety violations, falsified records, and deliberate negligence, including those emails between Julian and Catalyst, is going to land simultaneously on several very important desks, including the desks of Catalyst Equity Partners Executive Board. Miles went pale, his fork clattering onto his plate. Are you threatening me, Mr. Bell? No, Miles, I said calmly. I'm giving you a choice, a way out. When this all inevitably comes crashing down, and it will, you can be the designated fall guy. The young, inexperienced manager who couldn't handle the job, who oversaw the decline, who signed off on the falsified reports. They will sacrifice you without blinking to protect themselves. Or, I paused, letting the alternative sink in. You can get ahead of it. You can cooperate. How? He whispered, looking desperate. By documenting everything. Everything Julian and corporate headquarters have pushed on you. Every directive to cut corners. Every maintenance request you submitted that they denied. Every safety concern you raised internally that was dismissed or ignored. Protect yourself. They'll fire me anyway, he mumbled. Maybe, I conceded, but you'd be doing the right thing. You'd be mitigating your own legal exposure, and you wouldn't have a preventable death on your conscience for the rest of your life. I pulled out one of my personal business cards, the ones I had printed after leaving Apex, and slid it across the table. Think about it, Miles. Carefully. You've got maybe 1 week before the dominoes start to fall. I left him sitting there, staring at my card, the picture of a man drowning, and finally seeing a lifeline. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Okay, I'm in. What do you need from me? MC. The pieces were falling into place. My network inside, the customer pressure from Meridian, the regulatory hammer cocked by the safety board, and now, potentially, the cooperation of the man they'd installed to replace me. All we needed now was one final push, one unavoidable crisis that would force Apex Industrial and Catalyst Equity Partners to face the consequences of their calculated gamble. As if on cue, the universe delivered. The #1 hydraulic press, the massive, aging heart of the entire production line, catastrophically failed the very next day. The main cylinder blew, spraying hydraulic fluid everywhere. No one was injured, thankfully. Pure luck again, but the entire line ground to an immediate, indefinite halt. The crisis point had arrived, sooner and more dramatically than I could have planned. My phone rang at 6:15 a.m. the following morning. Caller ID showed the main Apex Industrial Solutions number. I let it ring 3 times before answering calmly. Bill. Vincent? It's Julian Vance. His voice was tight, strained, stripped of its usual arrogant confidence. We have a situation here at the plant. So I've heard, I replied coolly. The news of the massive press failure had spread like wildfire through the plant grapevine. My phone had been buzzing with updates from Ricardo and Leroy all night. Look, Julian skipped the pleasantries, getting straight to the point. His desperation was palpable. I'll be direct, Vincent. We need your expertise. Urgently. The main press is down. Completely offline. Production has totally halted, and we have critical orders backing up, including the Meridian contract. Our current maintenance team, they can't seem to identify the root cause of the failure. That's probably because you fired Marcus Cole, I pointed out evenly, letting the silence hang for a beat. The man who maintained that specific press, flawlessly, for 15 years. I could practically hear Julian grinding his teeth on the other end. He let out a heavy sigh. Can we perhaps set aside the past for this immediate crisis, Vincent? The company, Catalyst Headquarters, is willing to bring you back in immediately. As a consultant, top priority, name your price. We need to get that press operational again, yesterday. I almost chuckled. They thought throwing money at the problem would fix it, would make me forget everything. I'm listening, I said, keeping my voice neutral. $300 per hour, Julian offered quickly, the figure clearly pre-approved. Starting immediately. Cash basis, if you prefer. No questions asked about how you fix it, just get it done. We need it running by the end of this week, Max. They still didn't get it. This was never just about the money or the job title. I'll be there in an hour, I said. But I have conditions. Non-negotiable. There was a pause. Name them, Julian said warily. 1. I stated clearly. I bring my own team. Ricardo Diaz, Leroy Jenkins, and Sofia Perez. And I want Marcus Cole brought back immediately, on the same consultant contract as me. They work under my direct supervision only. 2. I have complete, unquestioned authority over all repair decisions, diagnostic procedures, and any necessary parts, orders related to getting that press back online safely and reliably. No budget constraints, no bureaucratic delays, no second guessing from you or Miles. 3. Effective immediately. I want full, unrestricted access to all maintenance records, internal emails, and operational reports for the past 6 months. Everything. No exceptions. Julian hesitated. I could hear muffled voices, presumably him conferring with someone else, likely the newly arrived Harrison Grant. Then he came back on the line, his voice resigned. Fine, Vincent. Whatever it takes. Just get here. When I walked back onto the Apex Industrial Solutions factory floor an hour later, it felt surreal. The place was in controlled chaos. Operators stood around idly, uncertainty etched on their faces. Suits, people I didn't recognize, likely from Catalyst Corporate, huddled in anxious groups in the corners, whispering urgently into cell phones. And there, dominating the center of the main production line like a fallen giant, sat the massive #1 hydraulic press. Silent, dark, leaking vital fluids onto the stained concrete floor. Miles Corbin rushed over to me the moment I cleared the entrance, his face pale and drawn. Mr. Bell, thank God you're here, he stammered, relief washing over his features. It's even worse than we initially thought. Multiple system failures cascading. I just nodded curtly, brushing past him. Let's see it. I walked slowly around the crippled machine, my team. Ricardo, Leroy, Sophia, and a slightly bewildered but determined-looking Marcus Cole, who I'd called immediately after hanging up with Julian, following close behind. As my experienced eyes took in the damage, as my hands ran over the scored metal, the cracked hoses, the smell of burnt hydraulic fluid filling my nostrils, everything became crystal clear. It wasn't one single component failure. It was a cascade. Multiple, predictable system failures triggered by months, possibly years, of deliberately neglected maintenance, substandard parts, and pushing the equipment far beyond its operational design limits. Exactly what I had warned them about. Repeatedly. In writing. I turned slowly, my gaze finding Julian Vance, who was hovering nearby, wringing his hands, flanked by a taller, sharper-dressed man I assumed was Harrison Grant from corporate. I can fix this, I said, my voice calm, but carrying easily over the background noise. But first, I locked eyes with Julian, then shifted my gaze to Harrison Grant. I need to show you both something. I pulled out my personal cell phone and opened my email client. This report, I said, holding up the screen so they could see the subject line, urgent, documented systemic safety failures and negligence at Apex Industrial Solutions, Bridgeport facility, was just sent 5 minutes ago. To the entire executive team at Catalyst Equity Partners, including your CEO. To the lead investigator at the State Industrial Safety Board, Ms. Evelyn Hayes. And to Mr. Arthur Vance, Senior VP of Operations at Meridian Power Systems. It details, I continued, my voice dropping slightly, but losing none of its intensity. Every safety violation documented over the last 6 months. Every corner cut. Every falsified record. Every incident covered up. Every management decision. backed by email evidence that prioritized cost savings over the safety of the people working here and the integrity of the products you ship. It outlines the precise chain of negligence that led directly to this catastrophic failure right here. Julian's face drained of all color, leaving it a pasty white. Harrison Grant's expression remained impassive, but his eyes hardened. You can't do that, Julian stammered, his voice barely a whisper. I already have, I replied flatly. I lowered the phone and looked back at the silent, broken machine. Now, I turned back to Harrison Grant, ignoring Julian completely. Do you want this press fixed? Or would you prefer to discuss the contents of that report further? 3 long days. 3 grueling, round-the-clock days. That's how long it took my team and me to repair the #1 hydraulic press. A complex, costly repair involving custom-machined replacement parts and a complete overhaul of the primary hydraulic and control systems. A repair that would have been a simple, routine preventative maintenance task weeks or months earlier if they had just listened, if they had followed the original schedules I'd established. During those 3 intense days, while we worked amidst the grease and grime, a whirlwind of consequences descended upon Apex Industrial Solutions outside the factory walls. Meridian Power Systems formally suspended all current and future orders, citing grave concerns over product quality and supplier reliability, pending the outcome of their now expedited full quality review. The State Industrial Safety Board arrived, unannounced again, but this time armed with my detailed report and a warrant for a much more thorough, invasive inspection, focusing specifically on maintenance records, safety protocols, and management oversight. Evelyn Hayes led the team herself. Catalyst Equity Partners, facing pressure from their board, their largest customer, and state regulators, dispatched their own internal corporate crisis management team to Bridgeport to assess the situation firsthand and take control. By the end of day 3, just as we were successfully running the first test cycles on the repaired press, the news came down. Julian Vance was gone. Reassigned, they called it, to some meaningless desk job back at corporate headquarters, effectively exiled. Miles Corbin remained, for now, but in a significantly reduced capacity, demoted to an operational assistant role, reporting directly to the new interim director of operations who'd been dispatched from the parent company, the sharp-dressed man I'd seen with Julian, Harrison Grant. Late that afternoon, after the press was officially back online and the production floor was slowly, cautiously returning to life, Harrison Grant called me into the main office, my old office. He gestured for me to sit. "Impressive work, Vincent," he said, his tone professional, devoid of emotion but carrying a grudging respect. "Getting that press back online so quickly under these circumstances." He paused, steepling his fingers. "The corporate team has reviewed your documentation, the report you sent. It was very thorough, very compelling." I waited, saying nothing, just meeting his gaze steadily. As a result, Harrison continued, Catalyst Equity Partners is implementing a complete overhaul of maintenance and safety protocols, not just here in Bridgeport, but system-wide at all our manufacturing facilities. New investments, stricter oversight, enhanced training, a top-to-bottom culture shift mandated from the highest levels. He leaned forward slightly. "And as part of that new direction, we'd like to offer you a permanent position, Vincent. Director of Manufacturing Operations for Apex Industrial Solutions, Bridgeport, reporting directly to me." I considered the offer for a long moment, the silence stretching in the room. The title, the authority, the chance to run things the right way again. "At what salary?" I asked finally. Harrison named a figure. It was easily 30% higher than I'd been making before I was forced out. He also added, "And you'd have complete autonomy over establishing and enforcing maintenance schedules and safety procedures." He added a slight qualifier, within reasonable, pre-approved budget constraints, of course. I shook my head slowly, a wry smile touching my lips. "That's the core of the problem right there, Mr. Grant," I said quietly. "Reasonable budget constraints. Safety can't be budgeted quarter by quarter, optimized for shareholder returns. It's a fundamental commitment. or "It's nothing." I pushed my chair back and stood up to leave. Then I paused at the door. "I'll consult," I offered, turning back to face him. 3 days a week, at my previously agreed upon hourly rate. I'll help you rebuild the systems I created. I'll help you train your people properly, the ones you keep and the ones you need to rehire, like Marcus. I'll help you get this plant's production and its reputation back to where it should be. But I won't be a permanent employee again. Not here. Not under Catalyst. Harrison Grant considered this for a long moment, tapping his pen on the desk. He was a pragmatist. He needed my expertise, my credibility with the workforce, and my knowledge of the systems to fix the mess his predecessors had created. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Acceptable, Vincent. Your terms are acceptable." I didn't go back for the fancy title or the bigger paycheck. I went back for Ricardo, for Sophia, for Leroy, for Marcus, and for all the others on that floor who deserved to go home safe every single night. I went back because someone had to rebuild what had been carelessly torn down. I went back because I had spent 22 years creating something of value there, something built on diligence and care, and I couldn't stand by and watch it crumble completely. When I walked onto that factory floor the following Monday morning, not as director, but as Vince Bell, consultant and de facto lead foreman again, the machine seemed to hum just a little more smoothly. Maybe it was my imagination. Or maybe, just maybe, they knew their old caretaker had returned.